Hey guys, Domenic Nesci here. Today I want to talk to you about Heron Todd White's recent report and some recent reporting done by CoreLogic. Now, the things that I really like about this report is Heron Todd White do a very thorough review of all of Australia, and you can go through the whole thing, look at the different markets, where they are in the cycle and how they're performing. They have agents across Australia. So there's very good local market knowledge that you can sink into to understand what's going on. Now, the one thing that I really appreciate about this report is this part here. The national property clock. This is an old bit of terminology, the property clock. Many people out there would be familiar with it. But for those that aren't, essentially it puts the different suburbs around Australia on this clock. Let's zoom in a little bit. And it shows you where they are, whether it's at the peak of the market, a declining market, bottom, rising, so on and so forth. Now, this is rare. It's very rare for you to see all parts of the Australian property market either in recovery, rising, or peak. It means that generally speaking, all of Australia is booming and the property market, residential, is doing very well. You can see here that most of the markets, particularly houses, are sitting either rising, recovery, or approaching the peak of that market. So very good news for all the investors out there. This is a great time to be purchasing. I mean, ideally, you would have liked to have been purchasing at the bottom of the market. But I mean, if you're purchasing here, that's still a good time to be in there. So that's what's happening with houses. Units, very, very similar. You've got recovering, rising, or approaching the top. It looks like, generally speaking, most of the market is doing well. The only part that is suffering are Canberra apartments. And I would say that that is largely due to the amount of supply that's in the market. Now, you have seen a lot of the large developers in that market. They did create and have been creating lots and lots of apartments. I do think that there are some parts within the Canberra market that you would consider a unit, particularly because the prices are low and you're seeing some tremendous yields. There's some really, really strong rents coming out of that market. And if you choose your apartment right, you're going to do okay. Now, what I want to do now is actually show you this CoreLogic report. Again, shout out to Eliza Owen. Great work here. Now, this report is about what does spring selling season look like during lockdown. And Eliza essentially draws some parallels between previous years in spring. Typically in spring, you have this whole news cycle where people are talking about spring shoots or green shoots, where the weather starts to get a little bit warmer. People are more likely to come out of their house, start looking at homes. You'll see an uptick in the amount of houses, apartments, townhouses that are being listed, and you'll see an uptick in the amount of people that are interested in purchasing. Though, what we have a look at here, Eliza goes in to talk about the impact that restrictions had in Victoria. You can see this slump in the amount of newly advertised properties. People were locked up. A lot of people weren't able to go and purchase. So you saw a lot of people not purchasing houses and apartments. So there's certainly a downtick. But what the report goes on to say is that the monthly volume of sales following the lockup actually increased. So you can see the previous 5-year averages, it dips off the amount of listing volumes. 2020, it actually then started to increase. So it kept on going quite strong. Now, what we can draw from this, and here you go, the count of new listing advertised in Sydney. Now, this is relevant for us in Sydney who have been locked up. What will happen as a result of this lockup? We're seeing a very similar trend to Melbourne, where we're going to see a dip in the amount of listings and a dip in the amount of purchases. But what we saw in Melbourne coming out of a lockdown, there was an increase in the amount of listings, available properties. And what we're predicting here is potentially, if demand stays at the same levels as it has been, we're going to see an increase in the amount of activity. Now, the only things to really be conscious of is whereas Victoria, Melbourne last time had a lot of government stimulus to support the amount of demand, Sydney and the New South Wales and federal government haven't done that amount of stimulus. Some of it has actually come off. So, I mean, something to be mindful of is will demand continue to outweigh supply, or will the amount of supply that comes into the market outstrip demand? And that's when we may see a softening in prices. So time will tell, and this is just a good piece of interesting reporting. Keen to hear your insights and some of your thoughts. Stay tuned for next week's report. Talk to you later.